You gonna pay with welfare or stolen credit cards, old-timer?" The young clerk sneered, eyeing the limping veteran. An hour later, the black military SUV arrived. When the SEAL commander stepped out, he didn't salute. He pointed at the officers and said, "Release him immediately." Mark Davidson, 72, was heading to the local hardware store. His weathered 1979 Jeep rattled with each turn, but it ran because he'd maintained himself since returning from his final deployment. He wore faded jeans, a simple blue shirt, and sturdy work boots. No military insignia, just a barely visible Force Recon tattoo on his wrist, usually covered by his sleeve. That morning, he'd purchased supplies to build a wheelchair ramp for Johnson, a Gulf War veteran who'd lost his legs to an IED. Mark never charged for these projects. It was his way of continuing to serve. At the gas station, he pulled in to refuel. His movements were deliberate, methodical, his left leg dragging slightly from a bullet that had shattered his knee during a classified operation in Somalia. The pain never left, but neither did his discipline. The young clerk watched Mark through the window, smirking at the old Jeep and limping man. When Mark entered to pay, the clerk's disrespect was immediate. "Military discount?" The clerk laughed, mockingly saluting. "Sure, Grandpa. Whatever war stories you're selling today." Mark said nothing. He'd faced worse than arrogant kids. "That'll be $47.82, the clerk announced loudly, "unless your welfare check hasn't cleared yet." Several customers chuckled. Mark placed 3 20s on the counter, his scarred hand steady. The clerk made a show of checking each bill for authenticity. "These look as ancient as you. Military man, huh?" He pointed to Mark's wrist where his sleeve had risen, revealing part of the tattoo. "What? You watched too many war movies and got a fake tattoo." Mark collected his change silently. As he turned to leave, the clerk called out, "Hey everyone, we got ourselves a stolen valor case," pretending to be military to get discounts. A man in line shouted, "My brother served. People like you disgust me." Mark paused, turned slowly. "Son, I'd suggest you reconsider your words." His quiet tone carried such authority that the store fell momentarily silent. The clerk, embarrassed by this reaction, doubled down. "Or what, old man? You'll call in an airstrike?" He laughed nervously. "Security! I think this man threatened me." The store security guard approached uncertainly. "Sir, I need you to step outside." Outside, the situation escalated. The clerk had followed, still hurling accusations. "Check his ID. Bet it's fake. Probably stealing that Jeep too." 2 police officers who happened to be refueling approached. "What's going on here?" The clerk immediately launched into allegations. "This guy is impersonating military. Threatened me when I called him out." The officers turned to Mark, judgment already forming in their eyes. "ID, sir." The taller officer held out his hand, his tone suggesting Mark was already guilty. Mark handed over his driver's license. The officer examined it skeptically. "Mark Davidson, this your current address?" "Yes." "Any military ID to back up what the clerk says you're claiming?" "I haven't claimed anything," Mark replied evenly. "But yes, I served. Marine Force Recon, retired." The second officer snorted. "Force Recon? Those are the elite guys. You expect us to believe that." By now, customers were gathering, phones recording. The clerk looked triumphant. "Step over here, sir." They moved Mark to the police cruiser. "Mind if we search your Jeep? If you got nothing to hide." Mark consented with a nod. The officers methodically searched his vehicle, pulling out lumber and building supplies, tossing them carelessly on the ground. "What's all this for?" "Building something suspicious." The younger officer smirked. "Wheelchair ramp. For a veteran." "Sure it is." They found a locked metal box in the glove compartment. "Open this." Mark used a key from his pocket. Inside was a faded photograph of a military unit, several medals, and a weathered letter. "Playing dress up with fake medals now?" The officer held up a Purple Heart and Silver Star. "This is illegal, you know." Mark's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. The discipline of a man who had endured interrogations by experts far more intimidating than these officers. They made him sit on the curb while they ran his information. Passers-by stared. Some took photos. "Grandpa's busted." A teenager captioned his social media post. "Maybe we should check if he's escaped from a nursing home." The younger officer joked, loudly enough for Mark to hear. For 45 minutes, they kept him there. The summer heat beat down. Mark sat perfectly still, his breathing measured, his posture military straight, despite his bad knee screaming in pain. While Mark sat motionless on the curb, his mind drifted to places these officers couldn't imagine. Somalia, 1993. His unit surrounded, outnumbered. The bullet that shattered his knee came during an 18-hour firefight. He crawled 2 miles through hostile territory, dragging a wounded comrade. Yemen, 2001. A classified extraction operation gone wrong. The knife scar on his back came from hand-to-hand combat with 3 enemy combatants. He'd eliminated all 3, then completed the mission. Afghanistan, 2008. Called back from retirement to train a new generation of special operators, teaching men half his age how to survive what seemed unsurvivable. He'd received the Silver Star for actions that will remain classified until 2055. The Purple Heart, actually one of 3, from wounds sustained protecting his team. His techniques for high-altitude infiltration had become standard training for all special forces. But these weren't stories he told. Not to anyone. In this community, few knew of Mark's past. They just knew him as a quiet man who built wheelchair ramps for disabled veterans, who taught wilderness survival to scout troops, who silently maintained the town's Veterans Memorial. Behind the gas station counter, the older cashier, Dave, watched the scene unfold with growing disbelief. He recognized Mark. Every veteran in town knew Mark Davidson, though few knew the full extent of his service. Dave slipped into the back office and made a call. "Commander Wilson? It's Dave Miller from Riverside Gas." "Sir, they've got Mark Davidson sitting on the curb like a criminal." "Yes, sir, that Mark Davidson." The officers were writing citations, expired registration, improper vehicle maintenance, and suspicion of stolen valor. When the distinctive sound of heavy tires on asphalt made them look up, a black military-grade SUV with government plates rolled into the gas station. It didn't ease into position. It arrived with purpose. The officers exchanged glances. "Federal?" one whispered. A tall man in naval uniform stepped out, his commander insignia gleaming in the sunlight. 2 junior officers flanked him. "Which of you is in charge here?" His voice carried the unmistakable tone of command. The senior officer stepped forward. "I am, sir. We're handling a situation." "Release that man immediately." The commander's order cut through the air. "Sir, we're following protocol. This individual has questionable." That individual is Master Sergeant Mark Davidson, one of the most decorated Force Recon Marines in United States history. "I suggest you check your protocols again, officer." The commander walked directly to Mark. "Master Sergeant, permission to assist you." Mark stood without help, straightening to attention despite his pain. "Permission granted, Commander." The gathering crowd had grown silent, phones still recording everything. The clerk who had started it all stood frozen, color draining from his face. The commander turned to the officers. "You just detained the man who trained me and half the SEAL team commanders currently serving. The man who wrote the manual on survival tactics that saved hundreds of American lives." One officer stammered, "We didn't know." "You didn't ask," the commander replied sharply. "You saw an old man with a limp and made assumptions." He gestured to the metal scattered on the police cruiser's hood. "That Silver Star? He earned it extracting 34 hostages from warlord territory. Alone, that operation remains largely classified." The officers looked increasingly uncomfortable as reality dawned on them. Commander Wilson faced a growing crowd, his voice steady. Master Sergeant Davidson served in 6 major conflicts over a 30-year career. His tactical innovations during the Somalia engagement saved my entire unit. The extraction techniques he developed are still used by every special operations team in the military. The commander's aide stepped forward, carrying a leather portfolio with official seals. Master Sergeant Davidson's service record, the unclassified portion, including commendations from 3 presidents. The senior officer accepted it with shaking hands. That Jeep you were citing? The commander pointed to Mark's vehicle. It's been designated a historical military vehicle by the Department of Defense. It carried wounded Marines out of firefights in 3 countries. The paperwork is filed with your department annually. A woman pushed forward from the crowd. That's the man who built my husband's wheelchair ramp after a stroke. Her voice cracked with emotion. Wouldn't take a penny for it. Another voice called out, "He taught my son Scout Troop wilderness survival skills last summer. He delivers groceries to the veterans' home every Thursday," added an elderly man with a cane. The commander nodded. Master Sergeant Davidson never stopped serving, did he? The crowd had swelled to over 50 people. The story was spreading through social media already. SEAL Commander defends decorated veteran harassed by police and store clerk. The younger officer, face flushed with embarrassment, approached Mark. "Sir, I want to apologize personally for my disrespect." The store manager hurried out, having just been informed of the situation. "Mr. Davidson, please accept our deepest apologies. That clerk will be terminated immediately." Mark raised his hand. "No." Everyone fell silent. "Don't fire him. That solves nothing." Mark's voice was quiet but carried authority that made everyone listen. Education solves ignorance, not punishment. The clerk stood trembling. "I know. I'm sorry." "That's the point, son." Mark looked directly at him. "You never know who someone is by looking at them. That's why respect comes first, not last." The commander handed a file to the senior officer. "This is Master Sergeant Davidson's full service record, the non-classified portions. I suggest you and your fellow officers read it before your shift ends today." The officers nodded, thoroughly chastened. "As for his vehicle," the commander continued, "it has historical vehicle status granted by the Department of Defense. Perhaps you should check your records more thoroughly next time." The crowd erupted in applause, not for the humiliation of the officers and clerk, but for the quiet dignity of the veteran before them. As the commotion settled, Mark finally spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. "Commander, these officers were doing their job as they understood it. The fault isn't entirely theirs." The commander looked surprised. "Explain, Master Sergeant." "We've created a system where uniforms and badges matter more than the people wearing them, where protocols replace judgment." Mark gestured to the crowd. "I saw the same mistake in Somalia and Afghanistan. Young men following orders without context." The commander nodded slowly. "Always a teacher, aren't you, Davidson?" For the first time, Mark smiled slightly. "Until they put me in the ground, sir." He turned to the officers. "You learn from this, or someone else pays next time. That's how it works in combat, and that's how it works in life." The younger officer asked hesitantly, "How did you stay so calm, sir?" "I would have been furious. I've been shot at by better men than you, son." There was no malice in Mark's voice, just simple truth. Anger is a luxury you can't afford when lives are at stake. Out there, he pointed vaguely east, losing your cool means losing your team. I just never unlearned that lesson. The store clerk approached cautiously. "Sir, I don't understand why you don't want me fired." I was completely out of line. Mark studied him. "What's your name, son?" "Tyler, sir." "Tyler, have you ever failed at something important?" "Yes, sir." "Were you given a chance to learn from it?" Tyler nodded. "That's why. Because failure without learning is just waste. And I've seen enough waste in my lifetime." Mark looked around at the gathered crowd. Everyone deserves one chance to be better than their worst mistake. Commander Wilson watched this exchange with evident respect. This is why he was the most effective instructor in the Corps. He doesn't break people down just to show he can. He builds them up because he knows they can be more. The clerk stood straighter. "I want to learn, sir." Mark nodded. "Then start by helping me reload these supplies. I've got a ramp to build." Within days, the video had been viewed 12 million times. Veterans groups across the country shared it with hashtags like hashtag respect not assumptions and hashtag the quiet ones. The county sheriff issued a public statement announcing a new training program, recognition and respect. Veterans in our community. Mark reluctantly agreed to speak at the first session, where he said just 11 words. Service doesn't end with the uniform. Neither should the respect for it. Tyler, the store clerk, didn't just apologize and disappear. He began volunteering at the local Veterans Affairs Hospital on weekends. At first, the veterans eyed him suspiciously, the kid who disrespected one of their own. But Mark's acceptance gradually opened doors. Why did you really come back? Mark asked him one evening as they built a wheelchair ramp together. Because I realized I knew nothing about the people I thought I understood, Tyler admitted. 22 years alive, I never once actually talked to a veteran about their experience. The police department implemented a new policy requiring all officers to complete the veterans recognition training. The younger officer, James Keller, became its most vocal advocate. 3 months later, Commander Wilson returned, this time without ceremony or uniform. He and Mark sat on the porch of Mark's modest home, sharing whiskey and watching fireflies. You turn it around, Mark. Like always. Mark shook his head. They turned it around themselves. All they needed was a mirror. The town council voted unanimously to establish an annual Mark Davidson Day focused on community service projects. The first year saw over 300 volunteers building ramps, repairing veterans' homes, and creating accessibility improvements throughout the community. Mark's Jeep still rattles down Main Street most mornings. It still carries lumber, tools, and occasionally, when a veteran passes with no family, a flag-draped coffin to its final rest. But now when it passes, people notice, not because it's remarkable, but because they've learned to see the remarkable in what they once overlooked. At the police academy and the gas station's new employee training, everyone reads a laminated card with 7 words. You never know who stand before you. If this story touched you, leave a comment honoring the quiet veterans in your community. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that true heroes rarely announce themselves. And remember, sometimes the strongest people are the ones limping slightly, carrying invisible wounds while they continue to serve in ways we may never fully understand. Subscribe for more stories of unsung heroes walking among us.